Chapter 96. The further he went, the denser the grass became. From the knee-high grass, Sillin followed the traces left behind by the creature. It didn't take long for him to see a dead alien beast covered in black and red scales. Judging from the signs, this big guy was indeed killed by a bullet that exploded from the inside after it was shot. Black bugs crawled out of the ground and were eating. The strange thing was, not far from where the big guy died, the traces on the grass changed. They looked like they were dragged. There were many broken vines in the surroundings. Although these vines weren't thick, they were very tough. The broken parts of the vines weren't smooth, and it looked like they were forcefully broken. After tracking for a while, Sillin saw another big fellow. It had also been shot and died from an internal explosion. From this point onwards, there were clear signs of struggle in the dragging traces. Pushing aside the grass, Sillin discovered 3 deep scratches on the ground. They were probably left behind by Carrie's claws when he was being dragged by the vines. Just a few steps later, Sillin found a severed vine in the bushes. The cut was very smooth, so it should be Carrie who cut it with a knife. Further ahead was a steep slope. Below the slope was a green river. The river wasn't wide, but the current was very fast. Sillin found Carrie's gun on the slope. Carrie must have rolled down the slope and fell into the river. The protective suit was waterproof, but after all this, Carrie's protective suit must have been seriously damaged. The positioning device on his body didn't respond either. Sillin turned on the communicator to leave a message for Diaz, but he found that the communicator was buzzing and the signal was in chaos. What's going on? Forget it. Let's not worry about it for now. Sillin had installed a message button at the slope. If Diaz and the others had finished their business on the other side and followed the trail here, they would definitely discover this button. Sillin exhaled and looked down the river, hoping that Carrie was still safe. How is Carrie now? Carrie's current situation was very bad, very bad. When he was chased by the 2 big guys, his feet were tied up by the vines under the grass. But thanks to these vines, the speed at which his feet were tied up was very fast. Carrie didn't need to pay attention to his feet. He could focus on the 2 big guys behind him. The 2 big guys were obviously also troubled by the vines, which gave Carrie an opportunity to take advantage of. Otherwise, with the speed of those 2 beasts, they wouldn't have been destroyed so easily. However, success was due to vines and also due to vines. Carrie's protective suit was torn by a big guy, but he wasn't scratched. When the vines wrapped around Carrie, the capillaries on the vines pierced through Carrie's skin, which was not protected by the protective suit. The neurotoxin penetrated deep into Carrie's body, so when Carrie cut the vines, his consciousness was already blurred, and he was in a trance. After staggering a few steps, he rolled down the steep slope and fell into the river. Before falling, Carrie pressed the life button with difficulty, and a lifebuoy surrounded him. He didn't know how far he was washed away, but Carrie's A-rank genes played an advantage, and the trance caused by the neurotoxin in his body began to lessen. If a person below C-rank suffered from this toxin, they probably wouldn't last long before dying. After recovering some consciousness and physical strength, Carrie pressed a device on his arm, and a drill with a rope flew out. The drill shot into the stone wall next to the river, and drilled into it. Then the rope retracted and pulled Carrie to the shore. After climbing ashore and retrieving the drill in the stone wall, Carrie looked above the stone wall. Above it was the forest, similar to the steep slope that he fell down. However, Carrie planned to stay here for the time being. What if he went up and encountered those big guys again? He didn't know if the communicator was broken or there was no signal, but there was no response. Taking a breath, Carrie looked at the dark green river. The river was a bit strange. The speed of the river had decreased a lot, and it was almost flat. Carrie saw a bunch of egg-sized emerald green objects floating towards him from the river. Although his vision wasn't as sharp as usual due to the neurotoxin's influence, Carrie was sure that there were no such things just now. The emerald green objects on the river surface increased, and they gathered toward Carrie. Fuck. No matter how confused Carrie was, he knew that these things were not good. He flicked the drill hook again, and threw it toward the steep slope above the stone wall. After pulling it up the slope, the claw hook popped out from his wrist, and he climbed up the slope bit by bit. What if he accidentally fell down again? After climbing up the slope, Carrie lay on the ground beside a large rock. He felt like a puddle of paste, and he had no strength left. Although the symptoms of the neurotoxin had lessened, and his consciousness was much clearer, he still felt weak all over. He didn't know where the firearms on him were. If he encountered those hard black and red alien beasts again, only death would await him. In his current state, it was difficult to even cut a fruit with his wrist knife. As Carrie was thinking, he heard a familiar low growl. It was the kind of growl that was slow and rhythmic like breathing. Auditory hallucination? He listened attentively and raised his head. What a tragedy! Carrie wailed in his heart. He had just thought of these guys, and they had appeared. 1, 2, 3, 6. What happened to Diaz and the rest? Why were there 6 of them here? If it was possible, Carrie wanted to grab the cannon and fight it out with these guys. He would die without regrets. However, the current situation made him feel very unwilling. The 6 black and red alien beasts were not in a hurry to pounce on Carrie. Instead, they slowly walked towards him. Their gazes made Carrie feel like he was a stupid monkey for others to watch. Gazes? Carrie looked carefully. Indeed, the gazes in their eyes were not like those of ordinary animals, but more like the eyes of humans. That was called, yes, spirituality. That was what Yudi said. Seeing the 6 big guys slowly approaching, Carrie slowly propped up his upper body, leaned his back against the rock, and flicked out his wrist knife. In fact, his entire arm, which was connected to the wrist knife, was trembling. The neurotoxin had not been completely cleared, and his muscles were still twitching. However, there was still a grenade in the bag at his waist. In such a situation where death was certain, some people would choose to commit suicide, but not Carrie. He would fight to the end, even if he had to die together with his enemies. This was his belief, the belief he had chosen when he walked the path of a hunter. Seeing Carrie flick out his wrist knife, the 6 big guys revealed looks of disdain. Come on, you ugly guys. When they were within 10 meters of him, Carrie's other hand without the wrist knife turned to the grenade, ready to press the button. Roar, a long roar, like the roar of an ancient giant beast. The sound wave almost burst Carrie's eardrums. However, hearing this sound, Carrie almost cried. A gray figure flashed. Bang! Out of the 6 exotic beasts, 1 was sent flying, 1 was stepped on, and the other 4 were forced 20 meters away by the sound waves coming straight at them. The streamlined body glowed with a metallic luster, with a different kind of elegance, looking down at the 4 black and red alien beasts 20 meters away. Chapter 97. Carrie stared blankly at the gray fellow in front of him, that was even bigger than the red and black exotic beasts. From its appearance, it looked a little like a cheetah and a little like a lion. Its skin had a metallic luster, but it felt very soft like liquid metal. Moreover, it didn't look as ferocious as the red and black exotic beasts. However, why did that sound so much like that gluttonous Huimao? In the roar just now, the high-frequency sound waves were only directed at the red and black exotic beasts, and not in Carrie's direction. Otherwise, based on Carrie's current state, he would probably die on the ground with blood flowing out of his orifices. This big fellow with a metallic luster knocked a red and black exotic beast into the air, and even stepped on another one under its claws. The hard surface of the exotic beast that was stepped on was cracked, and many red and black fine pieces were peeled off to the side. It clearly didn't look as ferocious as the red and black exotic beasts, and its body was only slightly bigger. However, its domineering aura was displayed to the fullest. Under its elegant appearance, it couldn't hide its arrogance and recklessness. It exerted force under its claws. Crack, crack, crack. A cracking sound came from the red and black exotic beast under its claws. Black-red blood flowed continuously from its mouth, and its sharp white teeth were dyed red with blood. Roar! A miserable howl resounded through the forest. Even Carrie felt a chill run down his spine when he heard the voice. The birds circling in the air hurriedly cried a few times and flew away in a hurry. The 4 red and black exotic beasts bared their teeth and let out a low roar. The big metal fellow looked at the red and black exotic beast that could no longer move under its claws. With a chi sound, it extended its scythe-like claws. Carrie felt that the big metal fellow laughed disdainfully when it looked at the 4 red and black exotic beasts in front of it. Then, its claws swept across the red and black exotic beast that had lost its ability to move on the ground. Carrie was dumbfounded as he watched the red and black exotic beast that even his wrist blade couldn't finish off in one go be cut into pieces. It really was like cutting a fruit, and there wasn't a single trace of blood on its claws. After it was done, it even looked at the 4 red and black exotic beasts in a threatening manner. It didn't roar or bare its teeth. With just a simple glance, the 4 red and black exotic beasts turned around and ran away. Yo, what a mess! After absorbing the white ball, Huimao's metal form had become even more perfect. Without that kind of mechanical roughness, it looked smoother. Listening to the familiar voice, Carrie was still a little unsure. Who? Snore? It's Hubie Lu. Huimao's body slowly shrunk, returning to its original cat form. However, even this small cat form could not conceal its arrogance. It was clearly much lower than Carrie's, but Carrie felt that this fellow was still looking down on him. Carrie smiled and accidentally choked. He coughed twice and then looked at Huimao, who was licking his claws and wiping his face. Wheeze, come and give me a hug. Hold my ass. I could have eaten all 4 of them, but because of you, I had no choice but to spare them, Huimao said unhappily. Sillin told it, focus on Carrie's comfort. Don't just think about eating. Ah, then I'm really sorry. I dragged you down. Even so, Carrie didn't feel very apologetic. He was very grateful to Huimao for saving him at a critical moment. At the same time, Carrie also understood what Sillin meant when he said, when in danger, that cat will show mercy and save your life. Why don't I treat you to a feast next time when I have time? At least you know what's good for you. Huimao's tone showed that he was giving him face. By the way, how did you find me? Carrie asked. Sillin sent a sonic signal flare. I only found out that something happened to you when I came over. I was wondering how something could happen to Sillin so easily with his ability. Where's Sillin? I'll be there soon. After Sillin handed the task of finding Carrie to Huimao, he returned to check on Dias's situation. If he was looking for Carrie, Huimao would have an advantage. Moreover, Sillin believed in Huimao's ability. Before he left, he added, other than eating and sleeping, prove your worth. If you can't even save a person, you can stay here and live with the ultra beasts. Huimao was so angry that he almost chopped down all the trees in the area. Not long after, Sillin came looking for him. He and Huimao had a special connection. This was also why Huimao said that they were the same kind. After checking Carrie's physical condition, Sillin was relieved when he found that there weren't any particularly serious injuries. The vice captain and the others should be with the captain now. The reinforcements are here, and they came directly with the aircraft. I left a message for them and left a signal transmitter along the way. This place is very strange. There's a strong interference effect, but as long as they fly over here, they should be able to receive the signal within a small range. Knowing that everyone was fine, Carrie was also a lot more relaxed. Wheeze is very strong. Huimao squinted his eyes, enjoying Carrie's scratching of his chin surface. When he heard this, he snorted. Sillin glanced at the two and shook his head. He then walked to the red and black ultra beast that Huimao had chopped into pieces. I really don't know how many of these things there are. There were 6 of them just now. If it wasn't for Wheeze, I would have been dead, Carrie said. No, it's not. These 6 are not the group we originally encountered, Sillin said with a frown. Group? Yes. They are social animals. The forest that we passed through before was a group. There are many smells in the air, including the smell of their territory. However, the smell on this one doesn't belong to that forest. Carrie's face twitched. He thought that his sense of smell was very sensitive, but he really did not smell anything special. Of course, apart from the smell of blood. They're very intelligent. At the beginning, they were probably driving the horny-skinned beasts to test us. It's not that those horny-skinned beasts are intelligent. The real masterminds are these guys, and those birds in the sky. Sillin pointed above his head as he said this. The snakes we encountered were thrown down by those birds circling in the sky. With the cover of the dense branches, those snakes wouldn't fall to their deaths, even if they fell from the sky. These snakes should be very familiar with the smell of those horny-skinned beasts. They will chase after the smell factor in the air. And these snakes are also testing us. Carrie's mouth was wide open. Weren't these red and black ultra beasts a little too cunning? Then, for the third time, they drove out even more horny-skinned beasts to exhaust our weapons and ammunition. At the same time, they closed in on us in a fan shape, forcing us back while preparing to attack from behind the horny-skinned beasts. It's like they're hunting. While they're hunting, they'll force us towards the steep slope. There will be vines entangling us along the way. They'll watch their prey struggle and force them into a corner step by step. Their goal isn't to eat, but to enjoy this pleasure and learn from it. Carrie felt a chill in his heart when he heard this. After being a hunter for so long, this was the first time he was counterattacked by an ultra beast and ended up as prey. Captain and the others are coming. Sillin looked at the sky and turned around to help Carrie up. They used a hoverboard, and the two of them and one cat flew towards the slowly descending spaceplane that opened its hatch. Seeing that both Carrie and Sillin were fine, Diaz's worried heart finally relaxed. Let's return to the starship first. The situation this time is a little complicated. Chapter 98. The 6 advanced teams all suffered casualties. Other than Diaz's team and Lu Sua's team, the other 4 teams all suffered from varying degrees of death. After returning to the starship, Carrie was sent to the emergency room for treatment. Diaz followed Shotten to the main starship, while Sillin stayed with the rest of the team. Sillin, it's all thanks to you this time. Otherwise, our team would have lost a lot of people. Xiaoshang smiled at Sillin. His face was filled with exhaustion and joy. Not long after Sillin left, Shotten brought the others over in a space plane. The remaining red and black exotic beasts stopped fighting and quickly fled. Sillin waved his hand. Is everyone all right? Their wounds have been treated. The more serious ones are still in the emergency room, but their lives are not in danger. Where's Beaver? He's in his private workshop. He's processing the data he brought back. A copy of the data was sent to the technical analysts on the 6th team's main starship for analysis. However, Beaver was itching to do the analysis himself. Sillin went to Beaver's workshop and knocked on the door. Generally speaking, Beaver did not like to be disturbed when he was working. Therefore, the doorbell was set to silent, so Sillin could only knock on the door. After knocking for a long time, Beaver finally opened the door. His eyes were bloodshot. It seemed like the data analysis was not going well. What? Beaver asked weakly. It was too mentally exhausting to analyze so much data in such a short period of time. Moreover, it was still chaotic. He kept feeling like something was missing. Let me borrow your analyzer to analyze a piece of audio. Sillin did not walk into Beaver's workshop. It was Beaver's private forbidden area. Other than Diaz, no one else had entered it. Even the 6th team's leader, Shotten, was not included. Audio. What audio? There were some audio recordings in the information Diaz and the others collected, but they were all the sounds of the horny-skinned beasts and the red and black exotic beasts. It's a bird. Beaver's eyes flashed. Go sit in the cubicle next door. I'll analyze it immediately. Nodding, Sillin walked to the cubicle next to Beaver's studio. Hey, why are you being so secretive? Why aren't you letting me in? Huimao followed Sillin in and jumped onto the table, asking Sillin to pour him a glass of juice. After licking it twice in a picky manner, he raised his head and said to Sillin mysteriously, Do you want me to eavesdrop and see what data you're processing? Eavesdropping? You can find out what he's dealing with through listening? Sillin was surprised. Huimao raised his head, as if he was the #1 expert in the world. Of course, all machines will make a specific sound, and the data they process will be spoken through language. It's just that you guys don't know about it. You guys can only know the calculation results and part of the process that are displayed on the screen. Then wouldn't we be able to eavesdrop everywhere as long as we invent a device that can receive and translate this machine language? Hearing Sillin's words, Huimao looked at him with disdain. Let's not talk about whether or not those low-grade machines can hear. Even if they can hear, they might not be able to understand it. For example, can you understand the indigenous language of those remote planets? In other words, the language produced by different machines is different. But why can you understand it? Agreeing with Huimao, Sillin knew that it was not easy to understand that kind of machine language. Otherwise, the League of Stars would have invented that kind of eavesdropping device a long time ago. There was something else that Sillin was puzzled about. Beaver's studio had very good soundproofing, so how did Huimao hear it? Or could it be that this kind of machine language was not sound waves? I don't know. I just know that they are talking, and I can understand them. This is the ability of the miracle life of the universe. Sillin rubbed his chin. Just as Huimao was about to float with pride, he grabbed one of its ears and changed the topic. Actually, you are hiding something from us, right? What? No way. Huimao's arrogance was blown away by Sillin's words. You are trying to cover it up. I know what you are thinking in your head the moment you move your ears. Nonsense. How is that possible? Huimao tried hard to control his ears and maintain a normal state. Look, your whole body is tense, as if I have seen through your thoughts. Sillin pressed a button, and a mirror appeared on the wall. In the mirror, Huimao looked like he was frozen and was suspiciously stiff. You don't even know how to lie. You are so stupid. You call yourself a centuries-old cyborg life form. Huimao opened his mouth and tried to relax his body. Then, he hugged his head on the table and curled his body into a ball, ignoring everyone. Looking at this guy's awkward look, Sillin flicked the tip of Huimao's ear in amusement. Alright, don't be shy. This is also a learning process. If you meet some crazy researchers, they will dig out all your information with just a few words, and then dissect you in detail. Sillin didn't want to scare it, but some of the researchers in the League of Stars were too crazy. They would really do anything, no matter the cost, by hook or by crook. Huimao's situation was too special. Compared to the cyborg life forms that had been recorded, Huimao definitely had more research value. He belonged to a different kind of existence. Sillin was afraid that one day in the future, if everyone didn't have the ability to protect Huimao, this guy would be able to survive with his own ability. He wouldn't be sold by someone, and still have to pay for the person. Chapter 99. Without waiting for Beaver to leave the team's starship, Diaz returned. After communicating with Beaver for a while, he called all the team members over and summarized the results of the analysis team and Beaver's analysis for everyone. What we faced before was a highly intelligent species. It wasn't just one, but two species acting in concert. The so-called highly intelligent species was the standard used to measure animals, not humans. A highly intelligent species might not necessarily be smarter than humans, but they were definitely not stupid either. Diaz pulled up the images of the red and black exotic beasts and the birds in the sky on the big screen. There are also two images taken from high up in the sky. I believe everyone will have a better understanding of them after seeing them. In the image, there was a basin with many stone circles made out of huge rocks, and the horny-skinned beasts were being kept in the stone circles. Outside the stone circles were some red and black exotic beasts pacing back and forth. The image changed to a cave. Around the cave were birds that resembled eagles of prey. They used their sharp beaks and claws to tear the horny-skinned beasts apart before tossing them into the cave. The series of actions were very practiced, and it was obvious that they had done this many times before. The team did not know what the depths of the cave looked like, but from the creatures that crawled out of the cave, everyone knew that this was a snake cave. There were many snake species that would not eat dead or still objects, but it was obvious that this was not the case. When the minced meat was tossed down, they fought to snatch it. Neither of these two creatures are at the top of this planet. There are many creatures that are larger and more lethal than them, but these two creatures are living very well. The reason is because of their cooperation, a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. When the birds encounter their natural enemies, they will run to the red and black exotic beasts for protection. And when large beasts that pose a threat to the red and black exotic beasts approach, the birds will also warn them. After a long period of evolution, they have become more and more adept at interacting with each other, and at the same time, their intelligence has also increased. Diaz switched to another image. This is the scene when the team leaders came to support them, and they retreated. Look at the eyes of this big guy when they retreated. It was a kind of unwillingness to give up, just like a human's. An animal's intelligence can be reflected in its eyes. The higher its intelligence, the stronger its ability to learn. When the Miantuan saw the look, it quickly hid beside Beaver's trousers. What a scary look, as if it was going to jump out and eat it. As for Huimao, he only glanced at it calmly, then yawned and went back to sleep. Sleep after eating. Yes, that was the truth. Chapter 100. Due to the importance of the energy ores, the sixth team had even sent out fighter jets this time. There were aircraft and fighter jets in the air, and the birds wouldn't hover above them to inform the red and black exotic beasts to cooperate with them. The red and black exotic beasts only watched from afar and didn't come over. They knew that it wouldn't end well for them if they forced their way in. Tang Qiuqiu followed beside Diaz. She held a gun in her hand, but her eyes were curiously looking at the plants around her. She had seen some strange plants in the videos before, and seeing them with her own eyes gave her a different feeling. Well, she had to record more videos as souvenirs. This area was the territory of the red and black exotic beasts. No matter which group they belonged to, they wouldn't act rashly if they saw such a situation. It was precisely because they were smarter than the other animals that they wouldn't act rashly. Without the threat of these two exotic beasts for the time being, Diaz's team could spend more energy searching for the energy ores. For the sake of these energy ores, they had even sent out some technicians. They had wanted to send out some robots as well. But the closer they were to the ground, the greater the interference the machines would receive, and their programs would be a little messed up. This was something that would happen in a high-energy field. This was also the reason why they rarely used weapons that could trigger the energy ores here. In the end, they still rejected this idea and sent out manpower to search for the energy ores. However, even after modifying the parameters and optimizing the detector, it still didn't show any specific information. It couldn't detect the specific location, and it only showed that there were energy ores. If they were to blindly mine, they would probably use up all the energy they brought along. By the time the manpower they had mobilized was almost exhausted, the energy ores might not even show up. Yudi held the detector casually. Right now, he was only holding it for show. From the looks of it, the modified detector by the technical team wasn't of any use at all. If they were to continue searching like this, they might starve to death and still not get any results. The Miantuan lay obediently on Yudi's shoulder. It didn't want to be left on the starship, but it was too timid. Once it got out of the aircraft, it stayed close to Yudi. It didn't dare to run around randomly like the Huimao. 8 hours later, Diaz sighed. There was still no progress. If it really didn't work, he could only ask for permission to open a few random holes. Both fighters and spaceplanes consumed a lot of energy. If they couldn't find any energy here, then they would have suffered a great loss. They still had to stay in Sector Z for a while, and if they couldn't replenish their energy and deplete their reserves prematurely, then they would face a very difficult situation. This reminds me of those black and red alien beasts, and those horny-skinned beasts with slightly black keratin and bony plates on the front half of their bodies. Maybe it's because of this energy, or buried under the ground, that the high-energy field produced by this energy, or had stimulated them to develop hard epidermis, even when they couldn't sense the existence of the energy field. After a long period of evolution, this hard epidermis gradually developed completely. Yudi analyzed. Other than the animals, the plants in the forest are also slightly hard. Maybe it really is because of this energy ore. If this guess is correct, then we have truly found a treasure. Diaz looked at the black and red crystal in his hand and said excitedly, the appearance of every new high-quality energy or would set off a wave, and the sixth team's trip this time was definitely not in vain. As long as they could get their hands on this energy ore, their sixth team would be able to stand tall in the entire Vanguard Hunter Regiment, even if they didn't gain anything else in Sector Z. Wheeze, you really are the treasure of our squad. Haha. Carrie tossed the detector aside and walked over to scratch Huimao's chin. Huimao narrowed his eyes in enjoyment, but Sillin knew that it wasn't Carrie's praise or chin scratching. It was because the cat had eaten its fill and was thinking about sleeping. Hey, Wheeze, where did you find this? Bring us over to take a look. Diaz spoke to Huimao in a tone one would use between friends. He didn't mean to order it at all. He knew that this cat was special. Huimao swatted away Carrie's hand, tilted its head and scratched its neck with its hind legs. Then, it yawned and stuck out its butt, stretched its waist and smacked its lips. Finally it said slowly, "Sure." It jumped down from Silen's shoulder in a flash, and ran in a certain direction. "Hurry up and keep up." Diaz directly used his hoverboard. Those who had hoverboards behind them also used theirs and flew over. Those who did not have hoverboards returned to the aircraft, and followed the people who were in front of them. Huimao led them through a series of twists and turns until they reached a certain part of the forest. The density of the trees there was very high, and the trunks of the trees were getting thicker and thicker. Everyone had to squeeze in one by one. Those who were slightly fatter, or those with more developed muscles, might not be able to make it through. When Diaz wanted to use his knife to chop off a few branches, he realized that the trees there looked similar to the trees in the forest, but they were at least 10 times harder. Diaz didn't order them to cut down the trees on a large scale. His intention was to first find the location of the energy mine, and then deal with it according to the situation. Just as Diaz felt that his bones were starting to deform from being squeezed, Huimao turned to look at him. "You can't squeeze in anymore." Chapter 101. Diaz, with a face full of resentment, squeezed his way back to instruct his men to start mining. Mining in this place was not an easy task. Diaz sighed in his heart. There were so many technicians and so-called professionals, but they could not even compare to a simple-minded cat. As for Silen, who had a strange bone structure, Diaz and the others had always thought that Silen was born with the ability to change his bone structure and body shape. Silen followed Huimao and continued walking. Diaz did not say anything. It was always better if someone could follow the cat and see what was going on. As they continued walking, even a person as thin as a bamboo pole might not be able to squeeze in. Many times, Silen's bones would be dislocated in order to pass through the narrow gap, and then straighten again. If Diaz and the others knew that Silen was playing with his bones like a jigsaw puzzle, their jaws would probably drop to the ground. "Ah, it's here!" Huimao shouted from not far ahead. Silen took a few more steps forward, and realized that from this point onward, there were no trees. The ground was covered with a layer of rocks, which looked similar to the rocks in other places. Silen took out his knife and stabbed it into the ground. The rocks here were very hard, and even if he stabbed for a long time, he might not be able to stab very deep. If he used too much force, the knife in his hand might even break. Below the rocks was a layer of rock. According to Huimao, the black and red energy ores were below this layer. Silen could also feel that this place was different, and some of the factors in his body began to stir. If this was the core of the black and red energy ores, it was hard to imagine that the strength of the energy fields in this vast forest, as well as the large area around it, was similar. Other than the core area, the energy fields covering such a wide area further highlighted the uniqueness of the energy ores. This rocky area was not exposed to the outside world. The sky was densely covered with spreading branches, which was why this rocky area was not found in the images taken by the orbiting satellite probes. In the middle of the rocky area, there was a hole that had been dug. It was Huimao's masterpiece. Silen walked to the side to take a look. The rock layer was about 15 meters deep, and below that were the black-red energy ores. However, that was only the information that Silen could glean from the cave walls. As for this hole, the black-red energy ores that extended from 15 meters underground to 30 meters underground had all been destroyed by Huimao. At this time, the cat jumped in and continued to eat, as if it was chewing on ice. If Carrie saw this, he would probably worship it again. No matter how intelligent an animal was, it would not eat energy ores as if they were food, and crunch them loudly, right? Silen jumped into the cave and touched the black-red cave wall with his fingers. Walking over, Silen directly pulled Huimao down from the wall of the mine, and jumped out of the cave with it in his arms. Although Huimao, who had a "I don't want to talk to you" attitude and had pointed its tail at Silen, was dragged out of the cave by Silen like a child. Huimao only struggled a little symbolically to express its dissatisfaction. However, it was not stupid. Now was not the time for it to gnaw on the energy ores unscrupulously. Since Silen gave it a way out, Huimao also gave face and stepped down. Of course, this gave face had always been what Huimao thought. When Sillin and Huimao saw Dias was discussing mining matters with a few team members and technicians. There was a tree that had been cut in half and left there untouched. When Sillin arrived, Dias and the others had just come to a decision. They would start digging a mine at the periphery where the trees were still sparse, and then extend the mine underground to the place where the ores were stored, until they reached the central area Huimao mentioned. Only then would they start mining on a large scale. Otherwise, it would be too much of a waste to only get the low-quality ores after spending so much effort. Also, if they were to cut down the trees in the forest, Dias was worried that it would expose the mineral deposits in this area. After all, Vanguard's 6th team was not the only one who had entered Sector Z. If there was another company who happened to find this planet and effortlessly set their eyes on these mineral deposits before they reported to the A squad, then the 6th Division would die an unjust death. After Dias contacted Schotten also agreed to this method. Because the energy ores were too special, it was best to conceal them as much as possible. Sillin talked to Dias alone and explained to Dias that Huimao could eat energy ores. Otherwise, how was he going to explain to the team that there was such a big hole there? Moreover, Sillin thinks that Dias had learned about Huimao's situation from Carrie a long time ago. He knew that Huimao was a cyborg. Since they knew about it, then smart people like Dias and Schotten would naturally know the value represented by cyborg life forms. It would be a great help to them in the end. Right now was the time for the 6th Division to work hard to develop. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in such a hurry to recruit talents. However, Sillin's own secret couldn't be exposed, so he could only let Huimao suffer. Of course, Sillin and Huimao had discussed this. As for taking the blame, Huimao didn't say anything, but he didn't object either. He just remained silent because he was still at odds with Huimao. Sillin knew that this guy had actually agreed. He rubbed Huimao's head and said, "When the time comes, they will ask you to look for the other kinds of mineral deposits." Huimao's ears pricked up. Of course, it could hear the hidden meaning in Sillin's words. It could eat them again after it was found. Dias's team was very excited about mining. The whole team had recovered from their previous depression, so everyone's attitude towards Huimao was very good. They knew that this cat was not ordinary. Thanks to this cat, their team was the first out of the 6 teams to discover the mineral deposit and start mining. "Vice Captain, the captain is looking for you." A team member came over from the aircraft on a hoverboard and handed the communicator to Dias. The closer they got to the mineral deposit, the stronger the signal interference. Therefore, in this area, communication equipment was not very good. If they wanted to communicate, they could only fly into the air and stay further away from the ground. Unlike the forest where the signal was intermittent, there was no signal at all around the ground. Dias accepted the communicator, launched his hoverboard and flew into the air. A while later, he came down and said to Sillin with a smile, "You and we should head over to the other squads. Their exploration isn't going too well, so a space plane will come and pick you up later. Is there a problem?" "No." Before Sillin could answer, Huimao agreed eagerly. It was obvious that he couldn't wait. Dias moved closer to Huimao's ear and whispered, "When you eat, be discreet. Take turns to work. If there's anything, look for Captain Schotten." Huimao's round eyes were bright, and he said in a tone that said, "Of course." 5 minutes later, an aircraft flew over. Sillin and Huimao boarded it on a hoverboard. After the aircraft flew away, Beaver said doubtfully, "There's something wrong with Sillin. It feels different from before." "Of course." Dias smiled happily. "That guy has already evolved to rank A." Sillin did not deliberately hide it. There was a slight resonance between rank A and rank genes. This slight resonance did not exist among the ranks below rank A. As long as one did not deliberately hide it, if the other party was sensitive to this slight resonance, they would be able to detect it. "That's good news. Our team is going to make a name for themselves." When that guy was rank B, he wasn't any weaker than Carrie. "Vice Captain, I think Sillin is our team's lucky star," Carrie said. Dias raised his head. "Of course. Don't you know who discovered this star?" Chapter 103. On the spaceplane, Shodan looked very happy at the data displayed by the energy analyzer in his hand. He promised repeatedly that he would not mistreat the gray cat, as long as it could find the source of the energy. He even promised to give the gray cat tens of thousands of GL credits. Although this amount of money was too little for the gray cat since it had always measured money in the hundreds of millions, it was still meat no matter how small a mosquito was. The gray cat accepted the money out of respect, and most importantly, Shodan allowed it to give the gray cat special treatment openly. When he found out that Silen's gene level had evolved to grade A, Shodan congratulated him happily, and did not ask too many questions. The first place they arrived at was where the Cold Beauty Ash's team was. Previously, Ash's team had landed at a place where the rivers crisscrossed. From the sky, all they could see was a green river. Unlike the creatures in the forest, which had hard skin on their bodies, there were not many animals with hard skin on their bodies in this green river. Some small mammals like rabbits were active in the area around the river. However, they had a special characteristic. Their bodies were generally green. The creatures in the river were not to be underestimated. Just like the green blobs that Carrie had encountered before, they all carried deadly toxins. One of the members of Ash's team had almost lost his life in the hands of these small blobs. These green blobs were originally flat like leaves in the river. However, when they discovered prey on the surface of the water, they would fill their bodies with gas and float to the surface of the water. Then, they would swim toward the prey and inject the toxins into the tissues of the prey, causing these parts to become soft and fluid for them to absorb. There were many hidden dangers in the river, especially a type of large jellyfish. Their long tentacles would extend out of the water to capture the land creatures that were closer to the river. There were also some amphibians that Asha and the rest had been guarding against. When Silen and Huimao arrived, Asha and the rest were resting at a place far away from the river bank. Shodan asked them to stop what they were doing and wait. Up until now, they had made no progress in their exploration. Moreover, 10 minutes ago, they had exchanged fire with more than 10 frog-like big guys. Asha and the rest had been exploring for a long time, but they still had no idea where to start. The technicians were sweating profusely and constantly changed the parameters of the detector to better match the situation here. However, the results were not satisfactory. When they heard that Captain Shodan had a solution, they could finally rest more comfortably. However, they did not expect that the solution that they had been waiting for was a cat. They had also heard that Dias's team had a cat that always followed the Miantuan into trouble. Asha looked at Huimao, who was sniffing left and right on Silen's shoulder. She frowned and said nothing. Shodan said to Asha, "Get everyone ready. We're going to start looking for oars. Those who have hoverboards, get on the hoverboards. Those who don't, get on the aircraft. Also, get your weapons ready in case those things in the river come out and cause trouble again." After saying that, Shodan turned to look at Huimao with a smile. "Wheeze please." Huimao ignored him. After sniffing and confirming a direction, it jumped down from Silen's shoulder and ran in a certain direction. Silen activated his hoverboard and followed behind. Shodan signaled for everyone to follow. However, Shodan did not get on the aircraft. Instead, he activated the hoverboard in his backpack and chased after the gray shadow with Silen. Huimao only wanted to find the energy ore as soon as possible, so it chose the shortest route, a straight line. Regardless of whether it was land or a river, Huimao was still traveling in a straight line. Because of this, everyone was surprised. At first, Shodan was going to ask someone to help clear away the green obstacles next to Huimao, but Silen said that it was fine, and that the little guy could handle it. What happened later proved that it was true. Fuck, this cat could actually swim, and it swam faster than fish in the water. Fuck, why was the cat covered in those green obstacles? It shook itself on the shore and was completely fine. What kind of cat was this? It could actually swim in such a dangerous place, as if it was playing. When the jellyfish reached out their skilled hands, the people in the sky fired their guns. Although everyone's target was the jellyfish, it was still a jellyfish and a hail of bullets. If it had been someone else, they would have been scared out of their wits, or at least panicked. However, this cat continued to swim as usual, turning a deaf ear to what was happening around it. It was very calm. Looking at Silin, it was true that the cat was like its owner. It was as calm as the wind without a trace. Not long after, Huimao stopped on a piece of land at the junction of two rivers. Then Huimao began to dig a hole. Its two front paws were like drills, and in a short while it had completely drilled into the ground. Asha and the others watched with their mouths twitching. This cat. Not only was it good at swimming like a fish, it could also dig holes like a mouse. Shotten gestured for everyone to wait on the surface. Silin looked around. There were no trees or tall plants on this piece of land. It was covered with a thick layer of something that looked like moss. A technician used an instrument to measure it. The photosynthesis of this moss-like plant was actually more than 200 times faster than that of normal moss. Chapter 104. Silin followed Huimao downstream. With his current physique, he could withstand the water pressure and dive for a long time without relying on a mask. Therefore, when Silin jumped into the water without wearing protective clothing or a mask, and without using a small submarine, some people on the shore were a little dumbfounded. Although it was only a river, its depth made many people flinch. The further down they went, the less light penetrated. At first, there were some dense water plants on the stone walls, and some plant-eating fish were looking for food around the water plants. As they continued to go down, the water plants decreased, and the surroundings became darker. This kind of environment made the hidden murderous intent in the darkness even stronger, and people could not help but feel anxious and panicked. However, Silin and Huimao did not feel the slightest bit of such emotions. There was no need for an underwater searchlight. With just a little bit of light, Silin could clearly see this area, and the source of this little bit of light was some glowing river mussels attached to the stone walls. Those magical light sources were what they used to attract prey. Perhaps it was because there were energy ores here, so these river mussels had evolved special suckers to attach to the walls. You would be wrong if you thought of them as normal river mussels. These river mussels ranged from 1 meter to 5 meters in length, and Silin could clearly see that there were some barbed teeth hidden inside their shells. When a prey came close to the mussel, these sharp teeth would firmly hook the prey in place. There was also the clamping pressure of the mussel shell. In this part of the river, there should be very few prey that had fallen into the trap and escaped. As soon as he turned his head, Silin found that the stupid cat had come close to the mussel, and only its fat butt, 2 hind legs, and tail were exposed. Knowing that there was no one else here, Huimao became angry. His whole head directly turned into a mechanical form, and it was the enlarged type. He swallowed the whole mussel, and then returned to his small cat form. Not far away, there was a fish almost 10 meters long swimming in this direction, ready to sprint to catch prey. When it saw this scene, it flicked its tail, turned around and ran away. It seemed that the intelligence of the animals here was not low. Huimao shook his head. He was very unhappy about being caught, but he went up to it out of curiosity. In the end, he felt that the mussel was not bad, but he was caught before he could bite into it. Huimao turned around and swam 2 steps. It stopped and spat out a green bead. It was the thing inside the mussel. Celine caught the orb before it could sink into the ground. Pearls? Silin looked at this green bead. It didn't have any energy fluctuations, but it had a feeling of vitality. Slowly, a palm-sized area that was glowing with green light was revealed. Silin placed his hand on the surface. The factors in his body had already begun to clamor. As soon as Silin released the seal, the energy within the ore surged towards Silin. The changes that happened to his body when he absorbed the energy were similar to before. The only difference was that the green energy ore could activate the AI chip to produce an optimal memory point that stimulated the human body to recover its vitality. In other words, if Silin was in some kind of life-threatening situation, this memory point would be activated, and his recovery ability would obviously increase by a lot compared to before. The effects would also be much better. This time Silin absorbed the energy very quickly. When he opened his eyes, there was already a depression in the area where his palm touched. Sigh, I'll continue to let that cat take the blame for me. On land, Shotten looked at the data that the technician had obtained from the hole that Huimao had made. He didn't speak for a long time. However, he was extremely happy. After being suppressed for so long, he finally saw a gentle light. Whoosh! A 10-meter-long, strange-looking fish with dark green patterns on its body jumped out of the river. No, it was thrown out. When everyone took a closer look, they found that the tail of the big fish was gone. If it was whole, it would be at least 20 meters long. Green blood was still flowing. After it was thrown out, it was still churning. Huimao jumped out of the water and went straight for the big fish. It lay on top of it and continued to chew. As long as it was not dead, the meat was still fresh. Before the fish died, Huimao had to chew more. Looking at this cat and fish, such a sharp contrast in size and such a strange scene, everyone felt a chill run down their spine. As for whether this fish was thrown out by Sillin or some other reason, everyone had their own guesses. However, the most important thing now was to mine, so they didn't continue to think about these questions. After Sillin went ashore, he told Shotten about the situation at the bottom of the river. The bottom of the river is the territory of this big fish. Looks like we'll have to use some underwater tools this time. Yes, you've worked hard. Take a rest first. We'll go to the next stop in about an hour. The slightly larger specialized underwater tools were all on the starship. Shotten needed to make some arrangements. Sillin walked to the side of the big fish. Huimao's eating speed was like a locust passing by. Now the big fish was no longer struggling and was on the verge of death. Sillin cut open the fish's belly and flipped it open to see what was inside. What are you looking for? Huimao licked its lips and stopped eating. It planned to catch another one when it had time in the future and eat it directly at the bottom of the river before coming up. I'm looking for something. Sillin continued to look without looking up. Chapter 105. Sillin used the foldable knife to look at the thing inside the fish's stomach. This big fish was completely dead, and its body was starting to change. Sillin's hand paused, and a black shadow shot out from the fish's stomach. Sillin's free hand grabbed it with lightning speed. It was a long thing that was as long as a finger. Its body was dark green, and it looked almost black at first glance. There was a big mouth on its head, and it let out a shrill cry that hurt people's ears. Many people who were busy turned their attention to Sillin's hand. Wow, what is this? It looks like it tastes good. Huimao was planning to run to the side to sleep, but when he saw this thing, he ran back. If you want to eat it, look for it yourself. There's more inside, Sillin said. Huimao sniffed the smell of this bug-like thing. He didn't care that it was dirty, and he went straight into the fish's stomach to look for food. What is this? Shotten walked over and asked. It should be a kind of parasite. I've seen some people find parasites on the bodies of deep-sea fish. Although this big fish is not in the sea, it's almost there. I heard that the parasites in the deep-sea fish are very powerful. Sillin observed the struggling parasite in his hand, and he put a stone next to its mouth. Puff! A hole was bitten out of the stone. Everyone who saw this took a deep breath. Such a powerful thing was a parasite. If it lived in a human body, wouldn't it be dead? No matter how hard a bone was, it wouldn't be enough for it to chew. After Sillin cut off its head with the knife, this thing still struggled for a while before stopping. It was obvious that it had a strong life force. Sillin used the knife to rummage through the fish's stomach again. The parasites inside were almost eaten by Huimao. This guy was quite fast. Hey, wait, leave me some of that thing. Sillin used the foldable knife to knock on Huimao's head. Huimao, who was about to take a bite, spat out the thing in his mouth. This thing tastes good. Of course, these are all things that absorb the host's essence. Sillin stored the little green bean-sized balls into a special bottle. These balls were the eggs of the parasite he had encountered earlier. Huimao, who had been tossing and turning in the belly of the fish, was covered in the green blood of the big fish. Sillin kicked him into the river to take a bath, and only allowed him to go ashore after he was clean. After arranging everything here, Shotten brought Sillin and Huimao to the next team location. It was a land of ice and snow. It was also the coldest place on the planet. The area covered by ice and snow was also very wide. Huimao found two kinds of ores there. One was transparent, and the other was white. The transparent ice ore was a special kind of ore, not an energy ore. It could not provide energy, but this ore was very dense, and almost all of it was made up of water molecules. It was a high-density compressed water crystal. If it was turned into a liquid, its volume would expand by 50 to 100 times. If it was placed in an ultra-low temperature environment, it would absorb the ice in the environment, integrate and slowly expand. It could be said that it was an excellent crystal for storing water. It was very useful for long-distance travel for the fleet. The other kind of white ore was indeed an energy ore. It could emit a cold light source, and objects that were illuminated by this cold light would be instantly frozen. Before this, there were only cold beam guns and airborne cold beam cannons, but there were no cold beam weapons that were more lethal and suitable for installation on starships. This white ore could achieve that effect, and the technical team was preparing to use this, or to develop a new cold weapon. Other than this spot, the energy ores at the other team's locations were about the same as before. That was why Huimao couldn't even be bothered to lick them. He was already sick of the taste. Everyone was very excited now that they knew the location of the ores. However, Sillin did not participate in the mining. Instead, he returned to the starship and slept for 2 days. The energy he absorbed had greatly affected the chips inside his body. While his genes were evolving, Sillin needed to control the changes and take the initiative. He could not allow these changes to happen willfully, or he might even turn into a monster when the time came. Shotten had already reported the matter of this planet to the A-Team, and the A-Team immediately sent people to the planet marked on the star map Shotten had given them. What the 6th team needed to do now was to mine while waiting for the A-Team to arrive, and hand the planet over to them. Then, they would proceed with the next step of their operation. Sector Z's planning mission hadn't been completed yet. Although these energy ores were enough to raise their influence in the vanguard, they had to finish what they had to. It had to be said that Shotten had chosen the right route back then. From the start of their voyage until now, other than some of their own kind at the outskirts of Sector Z, they had not run into a single hunter regiment for a long time the deeper they went. Right now, there was not a single exploration team like theirs that had come to the planet's surroundings. Sector Z was huge. No one could say for sure what they would encounter in the future, how many sacrifices they would have to make, and how much they would gain in the future. But no matter what, since they had made the choice, they had to keep going. During this time, the logistics team members seized the opportunity to replenish their food supplies. Only with energy and food supplies would they be able to travel more smoothly in the future. A technician had deduced a conclusion based on some parameter changes. Due to the effect of the energy field, there was a limit to the mining rate of the energy ores. There was a critical point to mining, which was also their equilibrium point. If this equilibrium point was broken, the planet would fall into chaos, and humans would not be able to stay on this planet for long. If it was serious, the planet's habitability would drop from rank B to rank C, or even lower. After sleeping for 2 days, Sillin returned to the planet. "Hey Carrie, where's Sillin?" Beaver asked. The man who had slept for 2 days had actually disappeared. That guy has been obsessed with parasites lately, and he went looking for them with Engie. The moment he thought of those disgusting bugs, Carrie couldn't help but shudder. At this moment, Sillin was watching Engie dissecting a crab. This crab was something he had come across by chance at the green riverside. It was nearly 5 meters long, and its entire body was covered in thick green fur. At the side, Huimao was happily tearing off the crab's giant pincers. Engie picked out a bug from the crab's lungs. "Oh, I didn't expect to actually have one." Engie smiled as he picked out a bug. "I've only seen parasites in ordinary crabs, but I've never seen this one. But it should be about the same. We can study it when we have time. The infection rate and degree of this parasite are very high. They live in the lungs, stimulate and destroy the host's lung tissue, causing coughing and hemoptysis. Some even invade the brain and cause paralysis." The ones Engie mentioned were just the ordinary ones. The parasite he was holding was probably much more terrifying. We usually don't bring parasites onto the starship easily. The risk factor is too high, and if we lose control, the entire starship may die. Never underestimate these tiny things. As he was speaking, Sillin and Engie's communicators rang. Sillin turned on the communicator, and Carrie's big face appeared on it. "Sillin, the A-Team is here." Chapter 106. As Carrie was speaking, Sillin saw a spacecraft enter the planet from outer space and fly toward the mining site where Diaz was. Sillin, do you want to go and take a look? Engie asked. Before Sillin could answer, his communicator rang again. It was Shotten. Sillin, come over here for a moment. Diaz is here. Bring Wheeze with you. Okay, I'll go right away. After ending the call, Sillin turned to look at Engie. Let's go together. Engie nodded and put away the tools in his hands. Guimao quickly gobbled up the remaining crab meat and was about to jump onto Sillin's shoulder when Sillin stopped him in midair. Go take a shower first. If Sillin's guess was correct, the A-team's focus this time was not only on the energy ores, but also on Guimao. Maybe there were a lot of people in the 6th squad who had overlooked certain aspects of the Grey Cat's performance. Or maybe they didn't know much about cyborgs and wouldn't think in that direction. But Sillin believed that a lot of people in the 6th squad had already speculated in that direction. Although he felt that the A-team's attitude towards the Grey Cat would be positive, they hadn't truly expressed their stance yet. He was sure that he would know Vanguard's Corps' attitude towards the Grey Cat after this meeting. When Sillin arrived at the mining site, Diaz was talking to a technician. When he saw Sillin, Diaz put down his work and walked over with a happy expression. Sillin, I'll bring you in. The A-team's people said they want to see you and Wheeze. After all, you two contributed to the discovery of the energy ores. Before bringing Sillin onto a spacecraft, Diaz patted Sillin's shoulder. Don't worry. Everything is better than you think. Of course, Sillin understood the hint in Diaz's words. With a smile, Sillin made a gesture of acknowledgement. This aircraft did not belong to the 6th Division. Although the structure was similar, the logo on it was different. It was also the symbol of a sharp knife, but there were more lines. Someone on the aircraft was already waiting in front of the hatch. When they saw Sillin, they enthusiastically led the way for him. Sillin did not know any of the people they met along the way, so they were probably from the A-team. The people on the aircraft only looked at Sillin for a moment. Then their eyes fell on the arrogant cat on Sillin's shoulder. This cat was quite interesting. Sillin was brought to the door of a conference room. Here it is, said the man, knocking at the door and shouting at the top of his voice. Chief, here he is. Got it, get lost. Sillin had never heard this voice before. The man was still smiling mischievously. He opened the door and said to Sillin, I'll be leaving first. You go in. Sillin walked into the conference room. It was a small conference room, and there were 3 people sitting at the small table. There was Shotten, and there were 2 people he did not know. Sillin could tell that these 2 people were very strong, but they both had their own characteristics. One of them had a very long chin, and his beard was so long that it almost reached his abdomen. The other person wore a large black hat that covered almost half of his face. His eyes were blocked, and his emotions could not be seen. He did not speak, and he was as still as a mountain. However, his presence was enough to make people feel pressured. The bearded man and Shotten were the only ones chatting in the conference room. Sillin, come over here and let me introduce you. Shotten pointed at the bearded man. This is Senior Bart, the former commander of the 8th B Squadron. Then, Shotten pointed at the person sitting on the chair. This is Senior Songba Leruo, the former commander of the 2nd B Squadron. In a hunter regiment, the older generation was respectfully addressed as seniors, because many of the newer generation were brought up by them. Therefore, anyone who was addressed as a senior had great influence in a hunter regiment. Greetings, seniors. Greetings, my ass. Shotten came all the way here, and he can't even bring himself to make a cup of tea. Bart complained while playing with the strands of his beard. Shotten was already familiar with Bart's personality, so he ignored Bart's complaint completely. Hey, why are you so reserved? Sit. Bart pointed at the chair next to him. Sillin looked at the chair, and then at Bart. Then he walked over to another chair and sat down. He did not take the one Bart pointed at. Bart's expression immediately twisted. Shotten smiled happily. Songba Leruo, who had been silent all this time, chuckled and said in a low voice, I say, bearded man, you lost the bet. Hurry up and hand over the money, or write an IOU. I still have a lot of Vanguard's bills. Bart snorted. It's just 200,000 GL credits. Why would I not have money like that? Why would I sign something like an IOU? Bart slapped a debit card on the table. There's more than 200,000 in here. You two split it, and give me the extra. This card looks familiar. Songba said. Did you steal Manny's card again? Pfft. With my character, why would I steal her card? Bart took his arm and said proudly, she forgot to take her card for lunch, so I brought it over. She only has a few passwords. You can try them one by one. Celine. Just how good are these people's morals? Bart turned to look at Celine. Kid, you made me lose the bet. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me? The chair Bart pointed at had been tampered with. Anyone who sat on it would definitely have their buttocks smashed. However, most people would not be able to tell. Only those with extremely good observation skills or strong senses would be able to tell. What do you want? Celine asked. Bart rubbed his long chin and pointed at Huimao, who was sitting on Celine's shoulder. I want it. Sure. It still owes you a debt. You just need to pay it off. Celine nodded. Huimao stared at Bart with his round eyes. Pay off the debt. That's great. I'll be free after I pay it off. How much? Bart asked. Celine stretched out 5 fingers. 500 million galactic credits. Bart's expression turned serious. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk business. The topic changed so quickly. Bastard, it's clearly 400 million. No, it should be more than 300 million. Huimao slapped Celine's face with his front foot to correct him. Bart looked at Huimao, and his serious expression immediately turned into a smile. Hey kitty, come here. Let's talk. Huimao looked at the person who had no intention of paying his debt. He walked over with elegant steps, stood up, and jumped. Under the gaze of the 4 people, Huimao grabbed Bart's long beard and swung it around like a toy. He even pulled on it to vent his anger. Hey kitty, be gentle. I'm telling you, you have to pay your own debts to show your integrity, Bart said. Shoten and Songba gave him a sidelong glance. Integrity? Do you even have that? Huimao tilted his head and thought about it. That's right. It would be too embarrassing to let others pay for it. It would be beneath his dignity. Letting go of Bart's beard, Huimao jumped back onto Celine's shoulder. Hey kitty, don't be angry. If you need anything in the future, just come to us. With our protection, don't be afraid even if the military comes. Bart's words sounded like a joke, but in reality, he had already expressed Vanguard's attitude. Celine smiled and nodded at Bart to express his gratitude. They did not ask too many questions. They just chatted casually and conveyed their attitude. It didn't take long for Celine to leave the meeting room. After Celine left, Bart's playful expression turned serious for real. Shoten, we received news on our way here that Poison Fong has entered Sector Z. Chapter 107. Poison Fong was a very special organization. There were hunters, assassins, rebels, and even retired soldiers among them. These people had complicated backgrounds, but they shared a common characteristic: madness. Madness that did not take life seriously at all, be it other people's lives or their own. Poison Fong's symbol was a bloody skull with 2 fangs growing out of it, making it look like a devil. Every Poison Fong member wore a bloody skull emblem on their body, and this emblem was made from a certain part of their own bones. Poison Fong originated from Sector V, and it was a gathering of madmen from all walks of life. They carried with them the cruelty and slaughter of Sector V, and they would do anything to achieve their goals. In their eyes, both the army and the 4 great hunter regiments were the same, targets to be slaughtered. Other people would have to think twice about sacrificing 800 men to inflict 1,000 damage on the enemy, but Poison Fong was more than happy to do so. This was also a headache for the military and the hunter regiments, who would be so bored as to risk their lives against them. It would be fine if these people were just blindly crazy, but the troublesome thing was that they were not blind. There was no lack of geniuses in Poison Fong. Even if they went to extremes and had twisted personalities, one had to admit that they had something in their heads. They liked weapons of mass destruction and nuclear reactions with high radiation energy. Sector V had plenty of places for them to test new weapons, and that was why more than half of them suffered from radiation sickness. A few days ago, Poison Fong tested a new nuclear weapon, and they forcefully turned a rank B habitable planet into a rank C planet. The remaining survivors were tortured and killed one by one. To this end, the League of Stars' military had sent people to Sector V to surround and kill Poison Fang. Strangely, however, Poison Fang did not fight them head-on this time. Instead, they gathered their people, stole some warships and fighters, and left Sector V for Sector Z. Some people say that they were forced to flee to Sector Z, but I don't think it's that simple. Bart said. Amen, I'll be careful. Shotten could not be careless when it came to Poison Fang. You came to Sector Z to complete a mission. If you run into Poison Fang, stay as far away as possible. It may be a little frustrating, but if you want to avoid unnecessary casualties, don't fight them head-on. We're not the army, and we don't have rigid rules. Don't be like Heaven's Birth. Heaven's Birth was one of the 4 great hunter regiments, just like Vanguard. A few years ago, a Heaven's Birth B squadron had encountered Poison Fang's people when they headed to Sector V and fought them head-on. Although their losses weren't great, it wasn't small either. After all, the people who could fight solo in the B squadron of the 4 great hunter regiments were all elites. Losing even one was a loss. On the other hand, Poison Fang had dropped 5 consecutive shockwave bombs on the densest area of the aircrafts while the 2 sides were engaged in battle. More than 30 aircrafts were blasted to smithereens, and 9 of them belonged to Heaven's Birth B squadron, while the other 20 belonged to Poison Fang themselves. This was why they were so crazy. Naturally, Shotten knew about Heaven's Birth. If the 6th squad ran into the current Poison Fang, Shotten felt a headache coming on. My suggestion is for you to turn back and leave Sector Z. After all, you've discovered a couple of different energy ores, and this is enough for them to go crazy. Although the news hasn't been leaked yet, it's better to be safe than sorry. If your squad runs into the current Poison Fang, your losses will probably be huge. Bart's expression was serious. After a period of thought, Shotten said, I'll discuss this with the lieutenant commanders before making a decision. After Sillin exited the spaceplane, he returned to the starship with Enji. Enji brought Sillin to his own workshop. There were some parasites sealed there, but they were all specimens and not alive. They may be dead, and they don't have eggs, but the genetic material in these specimens is still intact. Enji pointed at one of the parasites he discovered during a starship cleaning. Their genetic material is different from human DNA. Their genetic material isn't made up of purines and pyrimidines like us humans or common life forms, but a couple of other substances. Sillin accepted the document Enji handed over. It was Enji's research results in his spare time. It was just some basic research and not in-depth. After all, Enji wasn't a professional in this field. While they were talking, Sillin's communicator rang. It was Carrie again. Sillin, where the hell are you slacking off? Come over now. What is it this time? Come over and move the oars. Those transport robots go crazy the moment they touch the oars, so we have no choice but to do it ourselves. The commander told us to hurry up. He has other plans for us later. Alright, got it. I'll be right there. Sillin disconnected, apologized to Enji, and left to move the oars. Enji waved his hand. It's time for our team to follow up. I'll go check on the starship first. You guys go ahead. When Sillin returned to the mining site on the planet, Carrie was moving the oars. The dark red energy ores made him look even darker. Putting the energy ores on the transporter, Carrie wiped his sweat. I didn't know this stuff was so heavy. Hey, Sillin, I heard we have to change our plan. Sillin gave him a questioning look. Carrie looked around and whispered, I heard it from the deputy commander, but I don't know the reason. The deputy commanders were called to a meeting again. They're probably thinking about this. Seeing that Sillin didn't respond, Carrie elbowed Sillin again. Aren't you curious why? With the commander's personality, he won't give up on the original plan so easily. Yes, continue. Sillin rolled up his sleeves, walked over to pick up an energy ore, and walked over to the transporter. Carrie also picked up a piece, but his attention was clearly not on it. That means there must be some special reason. Take a guess. What is it? How would I know? We'll know after the commander's meeting. Why are you so anxious now? Carrie was about to say something when Tang Qiuqiu jumped out of an aircraft that had just landed. Big brother Silin, big brother Carrie, I'll show you something. Tang Qiuqiu ran over with a smile, something wrapped in her clothes. Huimao's nose twitched. Yummy. Tang Qiuqiu carefully opened the wrapped jacket, revealing an egg the size of 2 fists. There were white circles on the egg, and it was very beautiful. Oh, not bad. It'll be an extra for dinner. Carrie laughed. I want to eat too. Huimao moved forward. No, I found this not far from where Uncle Lu Sua and the others were mining. Look, doesn't it look like cream candy? Since Tang Qiuqiu had nothing better to do, she went to the mining sites to take a look. Not far away from the mining site in the land of ice and snow, Tang Qiuqiu was digging ice for fun and warming herself in the process. Who knew that she would find an egg like this? Normally, Tang Qiuqiu didn't have much love for eggs, but this egg looked very much like the cream lollipop she loved to eat. The circles of white lines looked like the rings of cream smeared on the outside of the lollipop. Tang Qiuqiu fell in love with it at first glance. If this egg looked similar to other eggs, it would probably be thrown into the frying pan. Chapter 108. Carrie poked the egg in Tang Qiuqiu's arms and asked, "What exactly was this egg made of?" "I don't know. Uncle Lu Sua said that they encountered a few types of exotic beasts. I just don't know which one this egg belongs to. However, I've memorized all the exotic beasts that Uncle Lu Sua mentioned." Tang Qiuqiu took out an electronic notebook and showed the image to Silin and Carrie. You only need to smell it and you'll know. There's no need to go through so much trouble." Huimao said disdainfully. "Really?" Tang Qiuqiu's eyes lit up. "I saw some claws and fur of the exotic beasts that Uncle Lu Sua and the others killed on the aircraft. Are those all you can smell?" "Of course." Huimao raised his head proudly. Tang Qiuqiu brought Huimao to the aircraft. Carrie asked Silin, "What's inside the egg?" The exotic beasts that Lu Sua and the others encountered were quite terrifying. No matter which one it was, they all felt dangerous. "Or maybe it's none of them," Silin said. When Silin touched the egg just now, he did an isotope analysis on it. Although he didn't have an accurate reference, Silin was certain that the egg was definitely more than 500 years old, or even 1,000 years old. It was even older than Huimao. The most amazing thing was that the egg was still alive. Although the life force inside the egg wasn't strong, it was easily detected when one got close. As expected, not long after, when Huimao and Tang Qiuqiu came out, Tang Qiuqiu was obviously doubtful. Her conclusion was, "It's none of them. Let's put the egg in the incubator when we get back. Maybe we'll know the answer soon enough," Carrie suggested. At this time, Carrie was hoping that there wouldn't be a second Miantuan hatching. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to store anything in his storage cabinet anymore. "All right, but I will visit it often." Tang Qiuqiu touched the egg in her arms and smiled happily. After the meeting, Dias gathered everyone in the team for a meeting. His intention was to change their original plan and leave Sector Z. According to the League of Stars calendar, the 6th squad had been in Sector Z for a few months now, and it would be about a year by the time they left. It was already a great harvest to find these minerals, and a planet with a rank B habitability in a year. But some people were still a little reluctant to suddenly abandon their original plan and return straight away. According to their usual style of doing things, they wouldn't stop here, even if their harvest was bountiful. However, they wouldn't complain about anything either. The captains naturally had their reasons for their decisions. After Dias was done, he left some of the core members behind to continue the meeting and briefly explain the matter of Poison Fang. The moment Poison Fang was mentioned, everyone knew immediately. No wonder the captains would make such a decision. It made sense. Who would want to run into those madmen at this time? After moving a portion of the mind energy ores to the special energy storage on the starship, the 6th squad left the planet. The A squad would take over the remaining matters on the planet, and the 6th squad didn't have to worry about anything else. In order to return and leave Sector Z, Shotten didn't turn back the way he came. This was also the result of his discussion with the lieutenant commanders. They would leave through another path. Although this path had been explored before, it was only a small part of it. If they could find something that they missed, then it would make everyone feel a little more balanced, and they wouldn't have the mood to turn back halfway. It had to be said that the planet along this path was quite good. It didn't take long for them to discover a planet that was unmarked on the star map and had no signal response from the planet. Its habitability was rank C. The sixth squad stopped, and Shotten sent someone to explore the planet. Meanwhile, Sillin, Carrie, and a few others were chatting at the lounge outside the control room. Sillin, the captain's looking for you, Carrie called out from his chair, without looking back. Sillin turned around and saw Shotten walking in from outside the door. Actually, he could have just contacted him through the communicator if there was anything. However, since Shotten had come in person, it shouldn't be a simple matter. Sillin, I just received a message from Bart that there's something he needs to solve with Whis. Fortunately, we're not too far away, so you can arrive in less than 2 days with a long-range spaceplane. If there's no problem, you can go with Whis. It's probably about the energy ores. The exploration here will take about 5 or 6 days, so it might not be done by the time you return. There's no need to rush. Shotten said. The planet was huge, and someone had just reported the discovery of some energy ores. Although they were just ordinary energy ores, it was still good enough. Therefore, more than one small team was sent this time. Based on the current situation, the exploration would take a little longer. Alright, I'm free now. We can set off right away. The spaceplane has been prepared for you. The pilot has already been arranged. You don't need to pilot it yourself. Wait, Captain, can I go too? Carrie scooted over excitedly. He was regretting that he forgot to stock up on food. He remembered that there were many special fruits there. When he had time, he would hunt a few beasts to make jerky and bring back to grind. I'll go too. I'll go too. Tang Qiuqiu jumped over. The egg was already in the incubator, but Yudi said that some parameters were missing. Although these parameters could be calculated slowly, it would be good to go back and get more data. Sure. Shotten didn't object. Alright, let's get ready to go. Sillin asked Carrie and Tang Qiuqiu to pack up. He picked up Hui Mao, who was bullying the Miantuan, and walked toward the spaceplane that Shotten had prepared. Although the maximum speed of the spaceplane was not as fast as a starship, it was just as Shotten had said. They returned to the green planet in 2 days. When Bart and the others obtained new parameters and recalculated the planet, they guessed that there might be a few more mineral deposits. However, they couldn't calculate the exact location. They could only calculate a rough range. The improved detector could only narrow down the range, but it couldn't determine the exact location. It just so happened that the sixth team wasn't too far away, and they encountered a planet with a C-class habitability that needed to stay for a while. After discussing it with Shotten, Bart let Sillin and Hui Mao come over. The detector couldn't detect the mineral deposits, but Hui Mao solved them quickly. There were indeed energy ores, but they were all small ones. The quality of the energy ores was much worse for Hui Mao than the ones he had eaten. Therefore, Hui Mao didn't pay much attention to these small mineral deposits. Since Bart wanted to find them, Hui Mao helped him find them. For this, Bart specially gave Hui Mao a large piece of energy ore of good quality. When Hui Mao had nothing to do, he would hug the energy ore and gnaw on it. Carrie and a few members of the A-team went to hunt a few exotic beasts, roasted them, and turned them into jerky. They also got some fruits, specially stored them in a large storage bag, and brought them to the spaceplane. Under the guidance of the people sent by Bart, Tang Qiuqiu headed to the land of ice and snow. She measured some of the missing parameters that Yudi mentioned, so that she could more accurately adjust the incubator's incubation environment when she returned. In a day, everything that needed to be done was done. Sillin and the others didn't stay for long. They boarded the space plane and left the green planet, flying back to where the fleet was. Going back and forth, including the day they stayed on the green planet, made a total of 5 days. For the hunters who traveled between sectors, it really wasn't a long time. However, it was in these 5 days that the sixth team underwent a huge change. When Sillin and the others arrived at the fleet's resting point, they were greeted by the sight of fighter wreckages floating in space. What exactly happened? Chapter 109. The scattered wreckage caused the people on the space plane to feel cold all over. What on earth happened? Maybe they had guessed it already, but there was always a voice in their hearts roaring loudly to deny that guess. The familiar patterns, colors, and emblems on the wreckage were familiar. They had piloted this kind of fighter before, but now it was scattered into pieces in this cold, infinite space. It looked exceptionally lonely and tragic against the dark background of space. Some of these pieces obviously didn't belong to the 6th Division, but they couldn't be sure who they belonged to. From the amount of wreckage they saw, it was obvious just how intense the battle here had been. The 6th Division's main starship was parked there quietly, and the B Squad's starship was beside it. Both the main starship and the B Squad's starship were covered in holes and dents. It was obvious that they had suffered a fierce collision, and it was almost an encirclement attack. The engineering robots were repairing the damage, while the space plane was slowly approaching the starship. Carey had already begun to lose control of his emotions. He kept sending messages to the main starship and the B Squad, but there was no response. Finally, the communication went through. Shotton's exhausted face appeared on the screen. "We'll talk after you return to the starship." Shotton cut off the communication once he was done. Carey kept sending call requests to Diaz's B Squad starship, but there was no response. Carey didn't care what the people inside the spaceplane were saying. He just kept pressing the call request button. Tang Qiuqiu hugged her little backpack and curled up in her chair. She was terrifyingly silent. There were a lot of things she didn't know, but she came from Sector V after all. She knew very well what a battle of this scale meant. Tang Qiuqiu buried her face into her backpack. For the first time ever, she was afraid to know the result. Sillin stared expressionlessly at the scenery outside displayed on the screen. His fingers repeatedly stroked the hair on Huimao's back. Huimao was also very obedient and didn't make a fuss. The spaceplane flew into the starship. The moment it came to a stop, Carey rushed out. Where is he? Where's Beaver? Where's Yudi? Where's the vice captain?" Sillin walked slowly behind them. From the moment the spaceplane entered the starship, he knew that they could no longer rush out of the starship. The starship's passageway behind them had been sealed layer by layer. This was probably because Shotton was afraid that they would rush out with their fighter or spaceplane on impulse. Afraid that they would be impulsive? Has the situation become so serious? Beaver, Yudi, Little 8, Xiaoshang, Diaz, not a single one of them was present. They entered from the starship of the small team. After they entered, the small team's starship docked with the main team's starship. Generally speaking, every spacecraft that came in from the outside had to be inspected to prevent any foreign threats from being brought into the starship without their knowledge. The person in charge of the inspection had always been Enji, but not today. Instead, it was Enji's assistant. Although the assistant was wearing a protective mask, and his expression couldn't be seen, Sillin noticed that his hand holding the cleaning tube was still trembling. Silence. It was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. Shotton had someone bring them to the main ship, and briefly explain the situation. A day after Sillin and the others left, the 6th Division ran into Poison Fong. This was something Shotton had been trying to avoid all this time, but he never succeeded. No one expected Poison Fong to pass through here. They did not try to hide themselves, and it was as if they wanted to tell everyone where they entered Sector Z, where they passed through, and which direction they went. Running into Vanguard Division 6 was also unexpected for Poison Fong, but it also stimulated their bloodthirst. They would fight the 4 great hunter regiments if they could run into them, and they would not give them any face at all. Originally, the 6th Squad should not have suffered too much of a loss against Poison Fong, even if their new energy weapon had not been developed yet. But the problem was that when Poison Fong came over, a couple of small teams were scouting the planet and isolated from the starship. Therefore, when Poison Fong's fighters attacked, the situation was very disadvantageous. Poison Fong's people had attacked in a suicidal manner and did not care about anything else. It was easy to imagine what kind of attack the scouts on the planet had encountered. Less than half of the people returned safely from the planet. Diaz and Lu Sua were heavily injured and were still in the ICU. Akai, Waqin, the 2 lieutenants, and more than 30 members were captured. As for why they were captured and not something else, Shotton did not say. There were also some members who returned to the starship who were still heavily injured and in critical condition, such as Beaver, Yudi, and the others. Although Xiaoshang and Ba Dao were injured, Their injuries were not serious. They had been staying on the medical floor of the main ship all this time. The medical floor of the main ship was filled with hurried paramedics and the members who were waiting anxiously outside the emergency rooms. When Celine came up, she saw Ba Dao and Xiaoshang standing outside the door of an ICU. Their expressions were heavy, and they seemed to be in a very depressed mood. Carrie said a few words to them before covering his eyes and leaning against the wall. Feeling his hand being held, Celine turned his head and saw that Tang Qiuqiu was holding her bag with one hand and tightly holding Celine's hand with the other. It was as if she was holding on to the last life-saving rope. Chapter 110. Celine took an isolation suit from the medical staff and put it on before walking into the ICU. After entering, Celine realized that only one of Enji's 3 pairs of hands was left. Enji was skinny to begin with, and now it felt like he was only supported by bones. The medical staff had told Celine earlier that Enji's injuries were too severe. Coupled with Enji's gene rank, he might not be able to hold on for long. Even with the help of the medical equipment, he would only be able to hold on for 2 days at most. Most importantly, Enji had no intention of surviving. Celine walked to Enji's side and sat down. He leaned forward to listen carefully to what Enji had to say. Enji was having difficulty breathing, and every word he said required a lot of energy. However, although Enji spoke very slowly and his voice was not loud, his pronunciation was very clear. Bring the diary over. I'll go get it right now. Celine got up and ran out quickly. Of course, Celine knew which diary Enji was talking about. Not long after, he brought Komunidan's diary to Enji. The last page. Celine flipped the diary to the last page. Although the middle of the notebook was mostly blank, there were words on the last page. It was a poem. Enji looked in one direction. There was a shelf outside the ICU, and on it were some of the items that the patients brought with them when they were sent in. Among them was Enji's small toolbox. Celine brought the toolbox over. The medical staff wanted to sterilize the box, but Enji waved his hand. No need. When Celine brought the box closer, Enji raised his hand and grabbed it tightly. He touched the box lightly and opened it. He swiped his finger on a small compartment inside. After unlocking it, Enji took out a key from inside. It was the key to Enji's workshop. On the starship, very few people used keys instead of password locks. Enji handed the key to Celine and placed it in Celine's palm. Enji didn't trust anyone else with the things in the workshop. Enji felt that only Celine would understand the preciousness of the things inside. Enji had difficulty breathing due to the removal of the equipment on his head. Celine wanted to help him put on the device again, but Enji refused. If I put on these things, I won't be able to hear. Enji caught his breath and pointed at the notebook. He asked Celine, I remember that you're from Sector X. Do you know Sector X's sector language? Celine nodded. A smile appeared in Enji's eyes. It's been a long time since I've heard Sector X's language. Help me read the poem at the back of the notebook in Sector X's sector language. Enji's words were spoken calmly, but Celine felt that Enji was speaking with his last breath. However, his eyes were bright as if he could see the distant starlight. Komunidan was originally from Sector X, and his dream was to become a freelance poet. So it had been almost 50 years before he knew it. As if in the desolate night, behind a solitary cloud, the bright moon shines its light, and its clear splendor fills the universe. After reading the poem, Celine closed the notebook and looked at Enji, who still had his eyes closed and a smile on his lips. He bowed. Have a safe journey. The heartbeat shown on the machine had stopped. Celine walked out of Enji's ward. Ba Dao stood outside the ward for who knew how long. Ba Dao felt that he couldn't understand Celine. From the moment Celine came to this floor, whether it was Yudi, Beaver, and the others in the ICU Dias, who had already passed away but lost an arm, or Enji, who had just passed away, Celine had been terrifyingly calm. What was this person's true thoughts? Ba Dao didn't think that Celine didn't care about their lives, but compared to Carrie and Xiaoshang, Celine's calmness was creepy. There was no emotion on his face, but when he met that pair of eyes, Ba Dao couldn't help but feel the urge to retreat. Ba Dao remembered what his seniors had said. There is a kind of person, when their emotions reach an extreme, they will be no different from normal. If you encounter this kind of person, don't provoke them, or you won't even know how you died. Silin. Ba Dao wanted to say something, but after 2 words, he couldn't say anything else. How are Yudi and Beaver? Silin asked. His voice was so calm that not a trace of emotion could be heard. The medical staff said they're getting better. They just need to survive these 2 days. They have to rely on themselves. The medicine might have side effects, so unless it's the last resort, no one dares to use it. Silin nodded and walked to Yudi's ward to take a look. The Miantuan was stuck to the wall. It looked like he hadn't eaten for a few days. After looking at the situation, Silin walked out. Description: the poem was extracted from Shelley's To the Skylark. Moreover, Poison Fong was a lunatic who had all kinds of tricks up their sleeves. They definitely had even more extreme methods to make the captives spill their secrets in a state where they were unaware. Where did they go? I don't know. Shoten shook his head. There were too many things to do on the starship after the chaotic war. And there were still hostages on Poison Fong's side. Poison Fong forbade them from tailing them, and Shoten did not allow anyone to follow them either. He knew that if Poison Fong discovered that they were tailing them in secret, there was no telling how many of the 30 or so lives would be spared. What do you think, Commander? Silin asked again. Bart has already learned of the situation, and the A Squadron just so happens to have reinforcements heading towards that green planet as well. He told us to wait for a while, and send some people over to support us when the reinforcements arrive. Everyone in the 4 great hunter regiments knew that B squadrons and a squadron were 2 different concepts. A B squadron was a place to test people, and only the best could enter the A squadron. No B squadron would want to ask for reinforcements from the A squadron, because that meant that their B squadron was no good. Like a child who had yet to grow up, they had to ask their parents for help when they encountered difficulties that they could not solve on their own. But for the sake of the 6th Division, Shoten still sent a message to Bart and explained the situation. Even though Bart had comforted him by saying that Poison Fong was a special organization that no ordinary B squadron could resist, Shoten still felt suffocated. Every time he looked at the wreckage floating outside the starship and thought of his squad members lying on the sickbeds, Shoten felt a deep sense of exhaustion. If there is any extortion information, I hope that you can tell me, Commander. Silin stood up and prepared to leave. Suddenly, the emergency communicator next to Shoten rang. Commander, there's an unmanned transport flying over. There's also an unknown signal. Chapter 112. When he heard the news, Shoten immediately brought up the screen and had someone send him the details. On the table in the conference room, a holographic screen was floating there. On the holographic screen was a small transport plane with a blood-colored skull symbol. At the same time, a signal was transmitted from the transport. After the signal was received, an image appeared on the light screen. A person appeared on the light screen, and it was a very sinister-looking person. There were blood-colored patterns on his face, and those patterns just so happened to be the symbol of Poison Fong, a blood-colored skull. The person did not look like a normal human either. His mouth was very big, and a pair of long fangs protruded from the top and bottom of his mouth. Dear people of Vanguard Division 6, I, Poison Fong's leader, Skeleton King Carreño, greet you on behalf of my little Poison Fong members. When he said this, Skeleton King Carreño smiled proudly. His 2 pairs of fangs extended outwards, as if he was about to swallow his prey. Carreño meant skeleton in the sector language of Sector V, so it was obvious where Poison Fong's skull symbol came from. However, Shoten had never heard of a person named Carreño before. Silin had never heard of this name either, but perhaps Skeleton King was more famous. The image changed and displayed the 30 or so captives. Among them were the 2 6th Team's vice commanders, Akai and Wachin. Although they were locked inside transparent pods and unconscious, they were still breathing. This alone made Shoten feel a lot more at ease. I heard that your team has made a small fortune recently. You should know that Poison Fong's days are not going well. We've been chased by the military recently, and we're in dire need of energy. That's why I'm not going to beat around the bush here, in order to let those little Poison Fong members live a little better. These 37 no 36 lives. I accidentally killed another one yesterday. Carreño spread his hands innocently. There are a few boxes on the transport. All you need to do is fill them up. With Vanguard's reputation, I believe that you won't use fake energy ores, right? Ka 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 ka. Carreño let out a strange laugh that made people tremble. There's a contract in the transport aircraft. To ensure fairness, you can send someone to escort the energy ores and deliver the signed contract. Of course, this king wishes to meet Captain Shotten. Ka 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 ka. The video ended there. After he was done reading, both Shotten and Lalo fell silent. Sillin, on the other hand, still spoke in a tone so calm that no one could guess his thoughts. I'll go. No. No. Shotten and Laro objected at the same time. Shotten felt that if Sillin went, he might not be able to return. After all, he was a rare talent. Shotten was reluctant to use him. On the other hand, Laro didn't trust Sillin. Chapter 113. Diaz was lying on the hospital bed with many instruments attached to his body, but he was in much better spirits. Asha left after Diaz woke up, leaving only Tang Qiuqiu and Carrie by his side. Tang Qiuqiu pursed her lips and did not say anything. Because Diaz had finally woken up. Yudi and Beaver had also passed the critical stage, but Sillin had disappeared. The most depressing thing was that Carrie and Diaz did not tell her where Sillin had gone. Tang Qiuqiu was young, but there were many things that she understood. Diaz sighed. Qiuqiu, Sillin is just out on a mission. He'll be back in a few days. Don't worry. Tang Qiuqiu still had her head lowered. You said that people will look at each other when they're telling the truth, but Carrie and the others don't even dare to look at me when they're talking. Carrie turned his head away, not wanting Diaz and Tang Qiuqiu to see the look in his eyes. Carrie regretted it very much. While they were all immersed in grief and indignation while guarding the injured, Sillin had quietly shouldered that heavy burden. Tang Qiuqiu lowered her head and fiddled with her fingers. She continued to ask in a low voice, "He won't come back, right? Sillin is so powerful, but he's still fine after being shot by you." "He'll definitely come back," Diaz said, trying to sound as sure as he could. Tang Qiuqiu did not raise her head, but her tears fell on her fingers one by one. "Qiuqiu, come here." Diaz raised his remaining arm and wiped Tang Qiuqiu's tears. "Be good. You'll be fine after a good night's sleep. Everyone will be back when you wake up." As soon as he said that, Tang Qiuqiu laid down beside Diaz's bed. Diaz had a miniature syringe in his hand. He had injected a sleeping potion into Tang Qiuqiu's neck when he was wiping her tears. "Carrie, take her to rest." "Vice Captain Sillin, it's fine. Sillin is much more powerful than you think." At the same time, on the transport, Sillin was sitting on the only chair in the cockpit. His eyes were closed as if he was sleeping. Sillin didn't even need to lift a finger to control the transport's flight. Everything was preset, and there was a hidden coordinate map inside the system. Due to time constraints, the technicians weren't able to safely obtain the coordinates of the hidden star map. Therefore, not even the 6th Squad could know where the transport was heading to right now, and they didn't dare follow it recklessly either. Sector Z was an undeveloped zone. Other than the outermost area, there were no long-distance signal transfer centers in Sector Z. Signal connections were inconvenient as well, but this was not necessarily a bad thing for Poison Fong. Sillin knew that his every move was being recorded by the surveillance system, and that the recorded images would be transmitted to Poison Fong's men, so that they could better understand the people who had come to this place. The people of Poison Fong were not afraid of death, but they were no idiots either. Chapter 114. Since Poison Fong was able to pry information about the energy ores from the captives, then they must know how the 6th Division discovered the energy ores. In other words, they must know about Sillin and Huimao. If the energy ores were enough to attract the Skeleton King and Carreño, then Sillin's value would also enter Carreño's eyes. After the space plane landed on the planet, Debienzi and a few other Poison Fang people surrounded Silin in the middle, not allowing him to make any small movements. Silin looked around. Judging from the situation, this planet's habitability was also rank B. It was not easy to find a rank B planet in Sector Z. But judging from the surrounding buildings, it was obvious that this planet had been Poison Fang's stronghold for quite some time. Not long after he got off the space plane, Silin had to pass through a device that looked like a door frame before he reached the exit. Silin had seen this kind of device in many places in other sectors before, and it was a device used to inspect subspace containers. After the device was turned on, the center of the device became distorted and blurry. Silin stepped onto it, and while he was passing through the device let out beeping sounds. At the same time, a display screen at the side displayed the location of the spatial anomaly. After Silin passed through the device, Debienzi walked forward. This time, however, he did not use his gun. Instead, he said with a fake smile, "Be tactful and hand it over." Expressionlessly, Silin took off a ring from his wrist and tossed it to Debienzi. Debienzi flipped a switch on the ring and poured out the contents inside. Looking at the food and water bottles scattered on the ground, Debienzi let out a tisk and stomped on the compressed food. He even crushed it a couple of times. However, he kicked the water bottle to the person beside him. If there was no problem with the test, then he could use it. Debienzi nudged Silin. "Test again." Silin also cooperated with him. The second test did not detect any abnormalities. "Let's go," Debienzi called out to the people around him, and together, they brought Silin to where Chronicles was. At the same time, no one noticed that a small metal protrusion at the bottom of the aircraft, which looked similar to its surroundings, slowly moved. It quietly slipped out and stuck to the bottom of another aircraft that was preparing to take off. When the aircraft took off, this small protrusion released some translucent sesame-sized balls. It was difficult to see them unless one looked carefully. The people at the port did not notice the small balls rolling along with the dust. They were still laughing and talking about the scene of a certain massacre. Silin was brought to a 20-meter-tall building. It wasn't grand, but it was definitely unique. The color of the building was blood red, and there were some large Poison Fang emblems hanging on the pillars. There were 3 people who had been skinned alive and nailed to the pillars outside the hall. They were still breathing, but they were not far from death. This was definitely torture. Beside these 3 bloody people were their uniforms. They were the uniforms of the 6th Division. One of them was a combatant, and the other 2 were a technician. Silin had an impression of everyone he met before. These 3 people were the subordinates of Akai and Huaqin, the 2 vice captains. Debienzi and the Poison Fang members around him let out proud chuckles. Silin picked up a few broken stones from the ground and shot them at the 3 people before Debienzi and the others could react. Death was always better than living a life worse than death. Debienzi and the people around him raised their guns at Silin in unison. But Silin acted as if he knew nothing. He turned to Debienzi and said, "Continue to lead the way." Debienzi narrowed his eyes, wrinkled his nose, and let out a beast-like growl. However, he quickly calmed down. "Don't get too full of yourself, kid. When the time comes, I'll skin you and nail you to the ground, slice by slice, and feed you to my cute pets." Silin said that he had been acting very calm all this time. He didn't pretend to be a trembling coward, because that would only be deceiving himself. Poison Fang might be crazy, but they weren't a bunch of idiots. How could a person sent by the 6th Division be a cowardly piece of trash? In the end, it would only backfire and arouse even more suspicion. Although Silin had only seen Chronicles through that video, Silin had a feeling that Chronicles was the kind of person who would dig out the secrets at the bottom of your heart the deeper you hid them. This was Silin's hope as well. After all, this way, he would be able to better develop according to Silin's arrangements. "Welcome to my kingdom." At the top of the Great Hall, Chronicles sat there and looked down at Silin, who was walking in step by step. As he spoke, his 2 pairs of fangs protruded outwards, making him look even more ferocious. Silin looked at Chronicles, who was sitting high above. "I'm very happy to be able to meet the legendary Skeleton King with my own eyes. I believe that Skeleton King has done his research on me already. So, Shall we get straight to the point? Carreño smiled and pointed at a chair a few steps away from Sillin. There's no rush. Sit first. There was a giant spider under Carreño's hand. Carreño's hand was placed on the spider's back, but it didn't seem to cover even a fifth of the spider's back. There was also an unknown animal lying at Carreño's feet. It had many pairs of legs. Its body was covered in a layer of fine scales, and its tail was curled up. 2 pairs of eyes, one big and one small, were staring at Sillin with a murderous glint in their eyes. This should be a native species of this planet. Sillin had just sat down when he said, I can tell you more about the energy ores, but I wish to meet my companions and confirm if they are still alive. Carreño looked to be in a good mood as he turned his head and spoke to a few Poison Fang people beside him. Sillin frowned at them. These people were not conversing in the language of the League of Stars. Sillin lost count of how many times he had frowned ever since he came here. The Poison Fang people were very happy to see Sillin's behavior. Carreño was conversing with the people in Sector V's language. After giving the order, Carreño looked at Sillin again. I heard that you have a talking cat that can find energy ores. After learning about Huimao from the captives, Carreño had planned to attack the 6th Division again and capture Huimao. However, he received the news that the person who came this time was Sillin while he was planning. It had to be said that this was news that excited Carreño. According to the information he knew, the talking Huimao that could find energy ores belonged to Sillin. If he could trap Sillin here, then it would be much easier to capture the cat. Sillin nodded. Yes, but I didn't bring it with me this time. While he was speaking, a Poison Fang member carried a person into the room and threw the person to the ground. The person who was thrown to the ground had his hands and feet cuffed and his mouth sealed. He looked like he hadn't caught his breath yet, and his eyes were a little unfocused. But when he recovered and saw Sillin's figure clearly, he struggled to get up, only to be kicked back to the ground by someone beside him. When Sillin saw this person, he immediately stood up from his chair and quickly walked to his side and crouched down. Vice Captain Huaqin, how are you? When Carreño saw that Sillin had clearly let out a sigh of relief, after checking Huaqin's physical condition, he stroked the giant spider's back and smiled. 2 pairs of fangs protruded out of his mouth. King, why did you summon me here? It was at this moment a young man walked in. Chapter 115. The newcomer looked to be about 26 or 27 years old. He was an average human with long bangs and no tattoos. However, there were a lot of miniature instruments on his body. Even if he didn't know what they were for, Sillin knew that they were very threatening. Although the young man also addressed Carreño as king, his tone was not as fearful and reserved as Dibienzi's. Instead, it sounded a little more casual. However, it seemed that the rest of Poison Fang were already used to this young man's tone and style. Even Carreño himself did not express anything, and simply looked at the newcomer with a smile. El Mouse, come here quickly. I'll show you something. Carreño smiled until his 2 pairs of fangs were protruding. He waved his hand and pointed at a chair, gesturing for El Mouse to sit down first. The chair Carreño pointed at was closer to the throne than Sillin's. However, El Mouse did not go over immediately. Instead, he examined Sillin from head to toe for a moment before leisurely strolling to the chair and sitting down casually. He crossed his legs and looked at Sillin and the others with interest. Footsteps came from outside. Before his subordinates could report, Carreño said loudly, "Come in." A dozen or so people came in after him. The 3 leaders should be about the same status as Dibienzi. After bowing to the Skeleton King, they sat down beside Dibienzi. Sillin could tell that they were not pure-blooded humans. It made sense. Sector V was a chaotic place with a lot of people, and there wasn't a stable social system or group distribution either. It wasn't strange for multiple races to live together like this. The few Poison Fang people who came in behind the 3 people carried the energy ores boxes and placed them at the center of the hall. Then they retreated to the back and stood still. Unlike the others, small fries like them did not dare to sit carelessly without the king's permission. The people who came in all carried a lot of weapons on them. There were ranged weapons, melee weapons, and even suicide weapons. Mouse's eyes lit up as he scanned the boxes that hadn't been opened yet. The instrument on his body had already sensed something. Haha, Mouse can't wait any longer. Debienzi laughed. Carreño moved his fingers, signaling the people standing behind him to open the box. As the box was opened, black, red, green, white, and transparent ores shone out, causing everyone to be unable to take their eyes off them. Mouse even jumped up from his chair and circled around the energy ores. His eyes were burning with passion, as though he had seen his lover. Good stuff. Mouse touched the energy ore inside. Debienzi and the others couldn't hold themselves back either. They got up and touched the energy ores, wishing they could just hold them in their hands. Lying on the ground, Joaquin's eyes widened as he stared at Sillin in disbelief. Carreño was engrossed in listening, and he was still imagining just how powerful a weapon powered by these energy ores would be. But to his surprise, the big spider under his palm suddenly moved greatly and escaped from under Carreño's palm. In just a few moments, it had scurried off to God knows where. If this was any other time, Carreño would have sent people to look for it. But now he was not in the mood to do so. Right now, almost all of his attention was diverted to the things that Sillin was talking about, because these energy ores could satisfy his ambition. The contents of Sillin's explanation were easy to understand. Carreño already knew some of the information from the captives, but there were some small details that Sillin added that made Carreño even happier. For example, Sillin said that the black and red energy ores could also stimulate some organisms to produce hard scales on the surface of their bodies. Every time an energy ore was introduced, Sillin would give some examples of its application. Although there were some things that Carreño had already imagined, the contents of Sillin's explanation were like paintings that had been colored, more vivid, and more attractive. Moreover, Carreño was convinced that what Sillin said was true. Therefore, following Sillin's explanation, the Joaquin's face became more and more ashen, while Debienzi and the others became more and more excited. Mouse was still reaching out to touch the energy ores. His long bangs covered his eyes, making it impossible to see his expression clearly. Chapter 116. After Sillin was done, Muse and Sillin went on to discuss a few formulas and parameters. In fact, the two of them even got into an argument over one of the parameters in the formula. Debienzi and the others knew about examples, but they were definitely illiterate when it came to things like formulas and parameters. Before Mouse and Sillin could talk for long, someone beside Debienzi shouted, Mouse, you're just looking for a beating, aren't you? Why do you keep talking nonsense? Just be as simple and straightforward as possible. Mouse was not angry. He ignored the person and turned back to continue his discussion with Sillin. Sitting at the high seat, Skeleton King was still smiling and did not stop Mouse. Even if Carreño himself did not understand, it was fine as long as Mouse understood, wasn't it? Mouse was an excellent weapon modifier and the absolute best in Poison Fang's technical team. Since Mouse came to Poison Fang, he had created a lot of good weapons for them. This was also one of the reasons why Poison Fang could run amok in Sector V without fear of the army, the hunter regiments, and the great families of the League of Stars. Therefore, the more Mouse discussed and understood, the more the modified weapons would not disappoint Carreño. Ahem, Skeleton King, is there any water here? Sillin stopped his discussion and looked at Skeleton King. His gaze seemed to be saying, I've been talking for more than an hour already, and you're so stingy that you can't even bring out a glass of water? When he heard that Sillin wanted to drink water, Debienzi and the others also felt a little thirsty, probably because they were too excited about the energy ores just now. Carreño clapped his hands and specially asked someone to prepare fruit tea. The fruit used to make the tea was a native plant of this planet. Sillin picked up the cup and looked at the blood-red liquid inside. He sniffed and found that there was a herbaceous fragrance. This tea is pretty good, Sillin said after taking a sip. Actually, you can drink it often. Carreño seemed to be implying something. Sillin smiled. I'll return after I complete this mission. It was a tactful refusal. Lying on the ground, the Joaquin sighed on the inside. How insensible. He was young after all, And he shouldn't have said something like this. If he said it, his last chance of survival would be gone. He should have taken a roundabout way. After drinking the fruit tea, Sillin continued his discussion with El Mouse. Just now, El Mouse seemed to be completely focused on the energy ores, and didn't drink the fruit tea at all. Seeing that Sillin and El Mouse had started discussing profound issues again, de Bienzi and the others were scratching their heads. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but de Bienzi felt a little suffocated. However, he attributed the reason to Sillin and El Mouse's discussion. Mouse, you traitor! Chapter 117. De Bienzi and the others had never thought that El Mouse would shoot them from behind. They had always thought that a person like El Mouse was most suited to hide in the backlands and dabble in technology, to create weapons and develop resources for them. To put it bluntly, they never thought that El Mouse would have the courage to shoot them from behind. A person who dabbled in technology. A person who couldn't do anything without formula and parameter calculations. A person who wasn't as tall, strong, or imposing as they were, had actually given them a fatal blow. Where did he get the courage from? Did he not know the consequences of betraying the Skeleton King? There weren't many people in the hall, and Carreño didn't like to place so many guards around him. However, Carreño liked to keep pets, and sometimes he would release his pets to bite someone as punishment. Carreño liked the scene of his cute pets tearing people apart and eating them, and the Poison Fang members around him would either be excited by the sight of blood or fearful. Either way, Carreño liked it. In the past, the pets would rush out the moment there was any unusual movement. Pets were more loyal than humans. But today was different. It was only now that Carreño realized that he had been careless. Although the pets inside the hall wouldn't run out and show themselves, they were still hidden somewhere in the hall. But what about now? He didn't see a single one of them, except for the native beast at his feet. No, the native beast was asleep. How could it possibly fall asleep after making such a huge commotion? Perhaps something was very wrong when the spider under his palm ran away. But Carreño had been listening to Sillin enthusiastically at the time. He had even started to make long-term plans in his mind to realize his ambition. In the end, it was still a carelessness. To be able to become the leader of Poison Fang, Carreño was a capable person. Moreover, he never trusted anyone, even subordinates who had followed him for dozens of years. At most, Carreño would regret the loss of a helper if he saw them die. He wouldn't be sad, much less reminisce. Carreño's first thought regarding El Mouse's betrayal wasn't why, but to avoid El Mouse's attack range, as if he had planned it beforehand. He would understand his subordinates first, and then he would be on guard. Carreño was always on guard against the people around him. So even if Carreño had walked down from his high position, he wouldn't enter anyone's best point of attack. This was also one of the reasons why he was able to avoid being hit in vital areas. Carreño had activated his protective shield while he was swiftly retreating to a place closer to the head seat. Then, he raised a metal wall to separate the head seat area from the area below the hall. El Mouse knew that he wouldn't get a second chance if he didn't end Carreño just now. Given Carreño's wariness, he must have arranged many escape routes. Although Sillin had blocked the gun with his body, he should have done something to take out a gun, right? But in reality, El Mouse didn't see any extra movements from Sillin at all. He just casually raised his hand, and the gun was already in his hand. El Mouse was very puzzled. Logically speaking, Sillin must have gone through many layers of inspection before he was escorted here. But this person was actually carrying more than one gun after the inspection. That was why El Mouse raised Sillin's danger level to a whole new level. Sillin looked at El Mouse, but did not raise his gun. Instead, he stared at El Mouse indifferently and asked, why? Sillin didn't think that Poison Fang would do something like this. He had only changed his plan halfway through. After he finished his fruit tea, Emyas introduced a secret code to Sillin when he was discussing formulas and parameters with Emyas. It was a secret code that only a portion of professional technicians could understand, and after combining the secret code, Sillin received news that Emyas was about to make his move. Sillin also changed his plans slightly, and this was also why he was sitting down with his back against the energy ores. Those energy ores could block light bullets, and Sillin wouldn't completely trust Emiya's. He didn't want to be accidentally injured. Elmouse shrugged. I want to give myself a way out and some time to explain. In order to avoid being toyed to death by Sillin like Debienzi and the others, Elmouse had pulled himself away in time, and expressed that he would take care of Debienzi and the others before Sillin took action. Before the fruit tea, Elmouse already knew that this person, who was even younger than him, had started his revenge a long time ago. If he hadn't installed a special device on his body, he definitely wouldn't have sensed the things that had unknowingly entered his body in that kind of situation. No wonder Sillin had spoken so brilliantly at the time. It wasn't because Sillin was too naive, it was because he wanted to attract their attention. Even if he was suspicious of the kids' intentions at the time, he had to admit that Sillin's explanation of these energy ores was very attractive and could evoke the ambition in people's hearts. It was no wonder that Kuranyo would be careless. Which way? Sillin asked. Elmouse smiled. If I tell you the truth, can you get those things out of my body? I can. After giving Sillin a serious look and knowing that Sillin was telling the truth, Elmouse made a gesture that all the hunters knew very well. Seeing Elmouse's gesture, the Watchin who had just managed to stand up felt cold sweat pour down his back. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.